yes, the whole economy is struggling in terms of workforce and staffing crisis, but particularly in terms of early years, because children who are missing out now, will end up at school already late in their development. And if we're not careful, we will face a lost generation of early learners.
Purnima, thank you so much for joining us again for our Business Outlook 22 preparations. It's wonderful to see you, and it's the end of another challenging year, ultimately, with the backdrop we've been working against in early years. How have the past 12 months been for your members and the nursery sector as a whole?
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you for inviting me again this year. And I think, going back to 2020 and moving into this year, it's been a roller coaster for providers, as you know. And at the beginning, it was kind of like, a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty. But then things started getting, slowly they're settling down. And of course, the number of children started increasing in terms of children coming into nurseries. But of course, it's nowhere near to the pre-pandemic level. Of course, the challenges are very different across the country. In some parts of the country, we're seeing, occupancy level so much higher, and in some places, there's some real challenges. So it's a mixed picture, but definitely 2021 has been a bit more positive than the previous year, definitely.
Nursery closures, it's a problem which I think we expect to see again this year. I know you've been supporting members that have made that difficult decision to close their nurseries.
But in terms of closures, and I think, COVID in a way was the last straw for some providers, because, they were already struggling. And when all these complicated guidance and all the additional things that they had to do in terms of keeping children safe and healthy, and of course, staff crisis and staffing shortages, and of course, staff isolations, that really kind of, made the decision even more stronger for some providers, because I know providers who were ringing me sometimes very upset that they've been operating for 20, 30 odd years and they have to close now, but this was the last straw for them. And of course, the ones who are closing, we're seeing a lot of closures, is the ones who are not only in the disadvantaged communities, but also linked to the lowest hourly rate in terms of their local authority funding. So that's a very kind of, telling picture in terms of the challenges with funding, as well as everything else, because, they have to rely on income from parents, and they can't just totally rely on government funding, because that would be disastrous for sustainability.
I think really what's been quite upsetting this year as the year has progressed has been to see closures off the back of Ofsted inspections. I can think of one example which was really quite shocking. An operator who'd had her nursery for a long time down in the southwest, and sort of a 90-place nursery. When it was last inspected by Ofsted in 2017, it was rated outstanding. She had an inspection which was rather unexpected, and off the back of that, some issues arose, and she made the decision overnight to close that nursery, despite her having the best part of 200 children on roll, so serving a large number of families. But in the statement she released, she cited that COVID and the turmoil of COVID and operational challenges, and just the challenges she'd gone through personally, just meant she didn't have the capacity to deal with the issues that had arisen. Because, as you say, I think final straws that break the camel's back. And I know the sector's worked so hard this year and last year, and it's really it's tragic to see. What would you like to see in terms of how the sector can lobby to address some of those workforce issues and better funding rates, which we've been calling out for so very long?
We need to really go back to the basics of what do we mean by childcare or government-funded childcare. And as a society, we need to really value those childcare providers and childcare practitioners for the fantastic work that they do, because that recognition has to come at all different levels, and from government to from parents to, parents really appreciated during COVID the support that they got from providers. A lot of providers have been in contact with the parents on a regular basis, sending them activities and having Zoom calls with them and virtual tours of the nursery, even though they had to follow some really very strict guidance. But that doesn't mean that moving forward that we can take it for granted that that will continue, because people are already leaving, and we've seen staff leaving to other areas of work. And, some of them are going to be Amazon drivers, some of them are moving into social care. There are lots of other areas people are moving. So I think that recognition and how important childcare is and how crucial for a child development early education is need to be recognized. And of course, we want to really look at a comprehensive policy, a review of childcare.
So Purnima, just staying with the funding considerations, lots of talk around the earliest pupil premium and other factors. What more do you think government can do?
I think, we're kind of asking the government to look at a number of areas. And like I said before, that, we really appreciate the increase in funding that we received. But I think there are areas that we still need to look at as part of that comprehensive review. For example, the earliest pupil premium in early years is about £342 compared to £1,345 as soon as that child goes into a primary school. So I think that needs to be matched at early years, and that is really important. And this is something the all-party parliamentary group, which we are sponsors of, working with Steve Bryan MP as a chair, have been pushing the government for, because I think the earliest pupil premium should be exactly the same as when they get into school. So that needs to be matched. The second thing, of course, as you know, for the last 3 years, we have been, through freedom of information request to local authorities, we've been measuring the underspends in local authority in terms of earliest and childcare funding. And last year, we kind of uncovered that £65 million was not spent in earliest and childcare. It was spent in other areas of the school's budget, like, for example, the additional needs and things like that. But what we're saying is, when the government says that they're investing X billion into earliest and childcare, we need to absolutely make sure all that money is reaching the front line for them to be able to deliver that high quality. The other area of underspend we highlighted to the Treasury is the tax-free childcare. And I think the latest report on tax-free childcare is about 2.6 billion underspent. And, what would that look like if all that money came back into childcare? We wouldn't have some of these issues that we're facing in terms of sustainability. So those are the areas that we want the government to really revisit and rethink in terms of how we can recycle some of that money along with the new money that's been announced already, which will make a huge amount of difference for providers.
I think with the profile of early years being raised during the pandemic and the sector being seen as that fourth emergency service, lots of private equity investment coming into the sector, clearly evidencing from them how they see the opportunity to grow and consolidate and how important early years is. But we just need that extra funding from government and extra funding breaks on business rates, don't we, for lots of those single site providers that have found it really quite tough.
There is definitely a churn in the market, and I think the size and the shape of the market is changing quite a lot and has changed during the last 2 years. And of course, some of that is causing concerns to some small providers as well, because they kind of struggling in some areas, and they see the expansion going on in those areas, and they are quite concerned in terms of how the market will move. But of course, investment in childcare has always been a most popular thing, going back even a few years ago. But I think what is important is we need to really look at, is this going to be a short-term thing in terms of how much investment is coming into the sector? And in the long term, where are we going to be? Because, the mixed economy exists and has existed for quite a long time. And that's how we want to keep it. And I think what is really important is the quality really has to stand out in terms of that delivery of high quality childcare always is going to be in demand. And I think, yes, we still have those challenges, but what is important is that for the government to really look at, not just to look at, oh, well, like the childcare sector is really booming and it's expanding, so that means they don't need any support. That is totally wrong way to approach it. But I think what we need to approach it is from a child's point of view, and what do children need? And with child at the center of everything, what we do in terms of the investment, because, every pound spent in early years is absolutely thousands and millions saved in the long term. That's the kind of attitude and the ethos and values we need to start with. And of course, the private sector, majority of the nurseries are in the private sector. And of course, the delivery can't just be based on the government funded hours, because that won't work. And, we need a kind of balanced portfolio of income from parental fee as well as government funded hours. And I think that's got to be the right balance. Where we are seeing some distress in the sector and settings closing is that balance doesn't exist, where they are totally reliant on settings who are reliant on, in our survey, some of them rely on the government funded hours only for between 60 to 70%. And there's no way you can manage and run a business like that and be sustainable. So that balance is to be really, really important.
What are you hearing from members about their ability to access training and their access to staff in the current workforce crisis climate?
I think, what's surprising really, Courtney, is during the pandemic, we focused on providing free resources to not just to our members, for everybody in the earlier sector, because we knew how difficult it was for everybody. And also with all the changing guidance, and of course, they still have to keep up to date with everything that they're doing. But what was really surprising is how much take up of that training has been. Last year alone, we trained around 40,000 practitioners, which is a record number. So because, of course, the way we deliver that training has changed dramatically, because, we're now delivering that virtual classroom training, online training, and through our development zone. But practitioners and nurseries have really continued to invest in that training. And of course, the biggest issue is the staffing crisis and of course, changing staff. And I think that's causing problems in terms of continuity for children, as well as managing the business, because, we have seen settings closing due to not being able to appoint a manager and not being able to have staff, and I think, again, we've seen the qualification levels, level 3 has been the most difficult to recruit, but across all levels, we're seeing it's really difficult to recruit. But I think that's where, we really need to have, we need to have a strategy in terms of looking at, we've got 30 hours free and, 15 hours free and 2-year-old funding, 3 and 4-year-old funding. But all that, what we never actually looked at is what kind of workforce do we need to deliver that promise? And I think, what qualifications levels do we need? That was more or less left to the sector to fend for themselves. I think that's where the investment is lacking. Yes, there is some kind of investment coming along now, but I think what we need is a clear workforce strategy, because, yes, the whole economy is struggling in terms of workforce and staffing crisis, but particularly in terms of early years, because children who are missing out now, will end up at school already late in their development. And if we're not careful, we will face a lost generation of early learners who will actually have some serious problems when they get to primary school and beyond. So I think that's where we need to really focus on.
Maybe possibly as well, I know we mentioned it last year and the year before, but I know it's a difficult topic, but ratios.
I think, ratios, the word ratios brings a whole host of emotions within the earlier sector. And I think also partly because it's kind of seen as a cost saving measure, which is totally the wrong approach, because that is not going to cost, save any cost for anybody. And anybody who has a 2-year-old will know how difficult it is to manage 1 2-year-old, let alone more than one. So I think, that's the kind of debate that we've had in the past. But what is really important is to look at, the business model for nurseries has changed over the years, and more so during the last 2 years. And I think, with the staffing crisis, we're hearing more and more providers saying, I'm struggling to have a level 3 or in every room, because with the moving staff and staff changes, sometimes I'm struggling really to be able to have that. And we do need some flexibility, but that doesn't mean actually change the ratios because to save costs. And I think that's totally the wrong approach. But I think also the level of qualifications of the staff is equally important, because if we're struggling to recruit people, and of course this is another area with Ofsted as well, when Ofsted come for their full EIF inspections, the staff who have been a key worker with that particular child has changed and moved on. And because there's so much churn in the sector in terms of staffing, that of course creates a problem. And of course, Ofsted needs to be mindful of this. And I think, yes, the EIF inspections have started from September, but what we can't have is actually go back to what it was like. And because things are not like what it was like, settings are still struggling and they still have challenges. And children especially, we're hearing a lot of behavioral issues, a lot of children needing additional help and support, and babies not able to settle when they come, because don't forget, some of these children haven't even interacted with other children or even with their own immediate family members for quite a long time. And suddenly they're now coming into nursery. So that is actually creating a lot of pressure. And that's where, of course, qualified staff and experienced staff come in. We've had staffing crisis going back about 4 years ago. And when we started doing our workforce survey, we have been warning, we started off with level 3 at nearly 85% to 80%. That dropped down slowly now to below 60%. And that's quite a worrying trend, because, that's what makes it even more harder for setting to be able to manage themselves, adequately, but also to give that confidence to parents as well.
But you must be looking forward to getting back to seeing members at the conference and events and connecting with everybody, just to catch up and talk about the past year and look ahead to new opportunities.
Absolutely. We're all desperate to network, and we're all social people, and especially in the early years more so than anywhere. And as you said, that we do member events regularly, but we have been doing them by Zoom. But next year, we're going to be doing them in a blended way. We'll have some live events, we'll have some Zoom events, but the Zoom events have been hugely successful. We had more than 150. In fact, one occasion, we had about 450 people attending. Our international event attracted massive numbers from about 8 different countries, so that's really encouraging. But equally, there's nothing like actually meeting people face to face, networking and catching up with people. So we've just announced our conference for 2022, and we really are looking forward to that. And I think, it's really wonderful to celebrate the fantastic work that sector has done.
As you rightly say, so much has been learned, and there's great abilities and attractions to doing webinars and Zoom meetings, but you can't get away from the value and benefits of face-to-face meetings. So I'm sure going forward, there'll be a hybrid of events and conferences, in person and then virtual events as well. And of course, all beneficial also to the environment in terms of, mitigating, travel, pollution and so forth. And that's been a very hot topic in terms of environmental concerns on the radar. But what else are you seeing in the sector across the UK in terms of sort of environmentally friendly initiatives that other nurseries are thinking of? What more can we do as a sector to make a difference?
I think, that's something, in terms of nurseries, that's nothing new, actually. A lot of nurseries have been using some of these practices for a long time, like, recycled nappies and not using wipes and water-based wipes and things like that. A lot of providers already have made those kind of changes within their setting. Sometimes those small changes make a big difference in the long term. Now, sustainability is another area that we will be looking quite closely at MD&A moving forward in 2022, because what we want to do is actually not only encourage people who are already practicing that, but to actually bring on some other new ways of working.
Purnima, what are your hopes and wishes for the next 12 months?
Well, I'm a very positive person. Everybody who knows me in the sector know that. Yes, we've been through tough times. We still have challenges to face through, but we learned a lot throughout this process. So moving forward can only be easier than what it was before. So I think that's the positive. But also, I think parents have now seen how wonderful early years in childcare sector and how the practitioners have helped and support them. So there is a lot more respect for earliest professionals than it was before. But yeah, moving forward, there will be always be challenges. There will never be a time when we can say, oh, yeah, everything is done. It will never be like that. But I think, together, as the voice of the sector, NDNA will always be there for providers, and we will continue to challenge and lobby the government across all the nations within UK to be able to achieve that.
Thank you so much for your insights and your opinions and your time to contribute to our conversation this morning. We wish you and and all members across the UK and the wider sector as a whole a very positive and productive year ahead. And as you say, there will be challenges, but there will also be lots of opportunities, I'm sure. So thank you, Purnima.